I'm Carolyn Costa. I was a teacher. I've lived in Bedford for 30 years now. Last March, when we had COVID, I caught COVID and it left me with a chest infection which turned into pneumonia. The pneumonia turned into sepsis, and as a result of that, in June 2020, I became a quadruple amputee. I went to my head teacher because I have mild asthma, and at that time they were saying it was a breathing illness. And there were a few of us who had asthma, and one of them, a doctor, had said, you really shouldn't be taking the risk of getting COVID. You shouldn't be working at school. So there were a few of us who were clinically vulnerable in that way, and the head very kindly let us work from home, even though the lockdown didn't start till the following Friday. So I actually stopped work at school and was working from home from the Tuesday before lockdown started the next Monday. And it was the day lockdown started that I developed COVID. Yeah, we were both really poorly, and you know the list of symptoms that were on the website, on the NHS website, we had them all. Literally, you could go down the list and tick them off. The only one I didn't have that Will did was the shaking. I didn't get that, but Will definitely did. We had COVID for about a fortnight, and then we started getting better. And you know, I took the dog out for a walk and I met some friends, I mean obviously staying a good distance, and as I was walking and said to them, yeah, we've been really poorly, but we think we're getting over it now. But where Will kept getting better, I started getting worse again. And I remember not being able to take the dog out, I was just too tired. And in the end we phoned the GP, our GP practice for me, and they sent me down to their COVID hub where I was checked over. And they said I'd got a chest infection. That was on the Monday, it would have been about the 20th of, maybe a bit after that, 22nd of April. So the Monday I spoke to a GP, they took the full history, they sent me to see another GP at the practice, was checked over, given antibiotics. I don't know quite how I got to the COVID hub. I mean, Will wanted to walk me around because I was so tired. And then the Tuesday, I was starting to be sick, and I remember waking up and I couldn't read, and that was really weird. You know, I just couldn't make sense of words on the page. They were like complete gobbledygook to me. So I phoned the doctor again and said, you know, is it possible that I'm allergic to this antibiotic, because that was all I could think of. And she said, oh no, it can't be that. But they sent paramedics out, who I thought were coming to take me to hospital, but actually they just checked me over and they said, no, it's the chest infection, you're fine. I think I was probably coming down the sepsis route by then. And then on the Wednesday, I phoned and asked to speak to my GP, who I've had for many years, Mary Fence. And she and her husband have been our GPs since we moved to Bedford. So they know me very well. And I basically told her, she said, well, you're not one to make a fuss. And if you're saying you feel that ill, there must be something really wrong. So she prescribed a different antibiotic, which Will went and got. But crucially, 2 days later on the Friday, she phoned back again. And when she heard I was still no better, she sent another paramedic out who checked me over. And all these people checked me for sepsis, which just shows how difficult it is to spot, because I've seen on my notes all the sepsis screening. I just didn't meet the criteria. Apart from the confusion, and from feeling as ill as I'd ever felt, worse than I'd ever felt in my life, and feeling that I just couldn't cope even with lying in bed. There was nothing that's on the list. But she phoned back on the Friday and sent this paramedic, and then spoke to me afterwards and said, well, let's get you to hospital to be rehydrated. So Will took me into A&E, she phoned and warned them. He had to use a wheelchair to get me from the car into A&E. And then he had to say goodbye to me at the door because they weren't letting anyone else in once he'd booked me in and see me go through to the treatment centre. And I can't actually remember anything else from the moment that I climbed on the bed in there. Can't remember a thing of it. The next memories I have are like 4 weeks later. But I've looked at my notes and I've got vague flashbacks occasionally. Other people have told me. I basically was in A&E ward overnight with oxygen, but my breathing was getting no better, in fact it was getting worse. So the Saturday morning they took me down to critical care to try CPAP. They found that didn't work for me, and they straight away put me on a ventilator. I was on a ventilator for, well, 2 weeks it was, and they didn't think I'd make it. Nobody thought I was going to make it. My family came and said goodbye to me twice. My daughters came down to stay with Will, and I always say that bit was harder for them than me, because I didn't know what was going on. For certainly the first 2 weeks, I was completely knocked out. But very quickly, parts of me started going black, my hands and my feet and my tongue. I've lost the tip of my tongue as well, and my mouth as well. So they then put a tracheostomy in to protect my tongue and my mouth. I was out of it completely for 2 weeks. Then they started a sedation hold, which is where they gradually reduced the amount of sedation. They decided it was sepsis. And so after 2 weeks, they started getting me out of the coma, and that lasted another 2 weeks. And I have vague flashes from that time. So I couldn't make sense of it. I thought I was trapped in some kind of game. So, and this is very common apparently for people in critical care. I thought for some reason I thought Will and I had signed up to some kind of experience game that involved being in hospital. But now I was trapped and I couldn't get out. And I remember white disembodied heads bending over me. And I found out later this was actually what happened, not the disembodied, but the heads, and saying, Carolyn, Carolyn, open your eyes, open your eyes. And then they'd orient me, it's Wednesday, it's whatever, we're just going to, and then there would be huge pain. And they'd say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And everything would go black again. And that was what they were doing. They were trying to wake me up and to get me to respond to them, but they were having to move me, and every time I was moved, it caused me immense pain. And so they'd put the sedation back on again. And then I can remember looking out of the window of the room I was in and seeing the trees cut as topiary with Bible messages in. And that was really interesting because one of my close friends had organised loads of people to pray for me at the very worst moments. And actually, I believe that's what pulled me through. The 2 nights when they were going to turn the machines off, there were people praying all through the night, and I survived both times. And it was quite hairs on the back of your neck thing. You know, when I said I'd seen these Bible verses, she said, oh, I prayed that helpful words from the Bible would come to you. It's been an interesting time. It's been amazing how surrounded with love I've been. You know, right down to I do charity work to raise money for a village in Kenya. And when I was in the most critical position, at one point the whole school stopped teaching for an hour and everyone prayed out loud for me. And, you know, that's just, oh, you know, it's amazing. Yes, absolutely. It's just heartwarming. So, best place to look for identifying sepsis is the UK Sepsis Trust website. And they have a list of the 6 signs. And I'd encourage everyone to get a list of those printed out and stick it on your fridge or somewhere, just so it's there. Because I'd heard of sepsis, but I didn't recognise what I had as sepsis. And if I'd seen, the particular key is feeling like you're going to die. If I'd seen that as a sign, I might have said, well, is this feeling that I just can't cope, feeling like I'm going to die? And I might have asked sooner, and something different might have happened. So that's the first thing, you know, look it up, find out the symptoms, have it to hand, and don't be afraid to say, could it be sepsis? Like I said before, I'm still me. I might not have any hands and feet, but apart from that, I'm just the same as I was before, and I'm very similar to everyone else around. And I can do most things I put my mind to, I just do them in a different way, or I might have to ask for help. Today I was shopping and I had to ask for people to get things down. You know, I don't have a problem with that. Please don't park your vans across the pavement. That's my other big thing, because it makes it really difficult when I have to go out in the road to get past, and especially when there's not always a slope. So, you know, just think about that, and don't park in the disabled spaces if you don't need to, because I do need to, and it irritates me. But yeah, I mean, just we're the same as everyone else. We just do things differently, make allowances for us. I'm sorry if I hold you up in the queue, you know. So the cycling is actually a group for people who've had strokes mainly, and I found out about it because there was a programme on BBC Woman's Hour that talked about women cycling and disabled cycling, and mentioned a link which I then looked at and found the Three Wheelers group. And I phoned her up, she's a physio, she's lovely, and she said, well, I've never done it with anyone who's an amputee, but let's have a go. Now online, I'd seen quad amputees cycling, but they'd all had bikes specially adapted for them. I just went with my hooks and said, well, let's see, and it's absolutely fine. You know, I've now got an attachment that I use. I use my hero arm, my bionic arm on one side, and I've got a koala mitt on the other to hold the brake, and it's fabulous. And the riding, they hadn't had any, well, even any double amputees. They've got one little girl there who's a single leg amputee, but I was the first quad amputee. So this is a hero arm, and it's a 3D printed arm. And it works with the muscles in my arm. So if I imagine flexing my wrist up and down, that's what makes this move. I'm not sure I've got it right in. There we go. And then if I press it, no. So now we're in the one finger grip. So that's that, and then press it again, and now we're in the fist grip. And now I can also move the position of the thumb in that one. So that's all done with me flexing my wrist, and there's a sensor inside that's mapped to the muscle. So I can feel my hands all the time. So I know where my amputated hands should be. And I can actually feel myself bending my wrist and my fingers and clenching my fist as well. And that's what does it. It's quite strange, really. But, yes, and that was bought for me by Champneys Charitable Trust, who amazingly, when I was really ill in hospital, a lot of the children from school, they weren't told until they knew I was going to recover, but they were told then and told about the amputations. And they, off their own back, did fundraisers for me. And one group did a trail around Henlow Village. And the owner of Champneys, Dorothy Purdue, saw them and asked about it, and then got in touch with Hannah, my daughter, to say, can we help? Because we have a fund for people with disabilities who are close to a Champneys centre. And of course, Henlow Grange is virtually on the same grounds as Henlow Academy. So they paid for that, £15,000 worth. Yeah, and that's all individually made to my measurements. Wouldn't fit anyone else. But it's quite cool, isn't it? It's quite a conversation starter. And kids particularly, this breaks the ice. I mean, that's why I've got funky legs. Because you notice that children often want to say something, want to know, but they don't know how to. And personally, I know it's not the same for everyone with a disability, but I would rather they came up and said, do you mind telling me what happened? I'll always explain, and explain to them how this works, and asking them what superheroes they can see on my legs just breaks the ice, and they don't feel quite as nervous, because it is quite shocking to see someone with no hands and feet. We had such amazing support from our local community though. We live on one of the new estates out near Go Outdoors, and I put a post up on our site saying, you know, is there anyone who could get some groceries? And we were virtually inundated. You know, people were doing shopping for us, bringing it to the door, walking our dog for us. It was quite amazing. It really helped. And that was another good thing. I think a lot of people have found that communities have got stronger through this. People look out for each other more. I'm trying to make a difference with other amputees. I'm being put in touch with other quad amputees or soon to be quad amputees. I think we all have a responsibility to make life easier for everyone else. So the thing with the toilets was just a lack of awareness. People hadn't thought how demeaning it is for someone who's disabled to have to ring a bell to go to the loo, to get someone to come and unlock it, when actually there's a perfectly good radar system. And all credit to Howard Centre, because they went ahead and they did it. You know, they got it done straight away, which is more than I can say for some. I certainly hadn't realised a lot of the problems that people with disabilities face. You know, I'd actually encourage people to go and find someone who's disabled and talk to them about the challenges. I did a description on my blog the other day of the problems of making a sandwich. Because, you know, if you've always just done it, you don't realise how hard it can be. I had to go and put this on to open the fridge and to get the cheese out, but then I dropped the cheese, and bending down on prosthetic legs to pick something up from the floor is really hard. And then I couldn't actually grip a knife with this one, so I had to put a different prosthetic on. And then I couldn't grip the knife anyway. You know, it's all things like that, that if you actually as an individual go and talk to another disabled person or look up their blogs, you'll find out what some of the problems are, and hopefully you can avoid making those problems worse. Oh, my blogs helped me hugely because I can look back, and I'm doing that now. I look back to where I was a year ago and I can see progress. I'm my own worst critic. I think a lot of us are. I constantly beat myself up. My husband's banned me from saying I'm clumsy, which I used to do all the time because I knock things over all the time. He said, "You're not clumsy, you just have no hands." You know, and for me to be able to see that this time last year I was just starting to walk with 2 sticks. Now I walk about confidently all the time. You know, I use a wheelchair for longer distances because I get tired, but I can walk quite comfortably on most surfaces. And the encouragement I've had from others has really helped me. And, you know, people telling me that my blog has helped them really helps me. Because one of the things about being this disabled is my life was centred around helping other people. And I feel useless sometimes because I can't do those things. So for someone to tell me, actually what you put on your blog helped me, that's really encouraging for me, because it's very easy for me to feel a bit useless otherwise. Right, so they're called body-powered arms. And these are what the NHS as default supplies to amputees. You can get other things, but you have to ask for them. And to ask for them, you have to know what they are, and that's not easy to find out. So these were developed for the soldiers who came back from World War I at Roehampton, which was where Douglas Bader learned to walk again. And it's all straps, and you have to know where the straps go. Again, these were made specifically for me. They wouldn't fit any other amputees. And you see the problems for someone with no hands. It'd be easy to put these on if you had hands. But then you wouldn't need them. There we go. Right. So they're powered by straps, and by pulling there, I can open the hooks. Same with this, and they're different size hooks, so this one is larger than that one. The thing about the hooks is they're really good for gripping. The problem with them is they're really hot and heavy to wear. So, and I still think they make me look disabled. I don't feel as disabled without them. I don't feel as disabled with the hero arm on. With these, I feel disabled. They're a good tool, and everything I use is a tool for a particular job. But I have to say I don't like wearing these. I wear them for a purpose. Whereas my hero arm I'll put on if I'm going cycling, I'll put it on to ride up with, because I don't mind how it looks. It doesn't really help with propelling the wheelchair, but it's easier to put it on at home. Whereas these, I wouldn't put these on, even though they make using the wheelchair easier. You know, I very rarely wear these in public, but they're quite a cool piece of engineering. Like going down in my wheelchair towards Danish Camp. I like walking around Bedford Park. People in Bedford Park are much more friendly than in most other parks. I don't know quite why. I feel weird saying that because Mosbury is really my local park, but they are. People are much more willing to just chat. Priory is lovely. So we're very lucky here. We're so lucky with all the beautiful places we can walk. I mean, York is a lovely place, but it doesn't have the number of parks that we have down here. I think we don't appreciate that as much, perhaps, as we should. Before all this, I used to go on long walks out into the countryside, and I'm looking forward to doing that with Duke again. I do a long circuit that goes right up to the Pole Hill Arms, and then down through Menhold, and back along the road, which is about 6 miles, which stretches his legs out. Do that in the wheelchair, obviously. I love walking around Mosbury Park because it's lovely and flat, so that's a really easy one. I challenge myself by going round our area and up towards Menhold because that's completely the opposite, very uneven and lots of hills. I think disability in itself can be really isolating. And if you combine that with the pandemic, which is also isolating, I think for a lot of disabled people, the pandemic has been really hard. And then you add in the fact that disabled people are more vulnerable to COVID and, sadly, in some cases, less likely to get help. It's a very difficult situation. And I'd just say disabled lives are just as valid as other lives. I'm lucky I've had both. I've had a non-disabled life and now I'm having a disabled life. Both those lives are valid. I'm not less worthwhile as a person now that I've lost my hands and feet. I think people have got so busy. I think life has got so much more busy, and maybe the pandemic has helped us to slow down a bit. It's interesting to think of the good things that can come out of something so awful, isn't it? I think it's made us appreciate things more. I'd like to think Bedford could get kinder as a whole, you know, and that's not just towards people like me, it's people like me being kind to others. It's expecting the best from people. You know, you see I walked past a group of young people today, teenagers, all together. It could be quite intimidating, but at least 3 of them said hello back to me when I said hello, which I thought was really nice. You know, we need to not judge people by how they appear. There's an awful lot of good going on there, and maybe we should celebrate that good more. Maybe we should be, you know, encouraging our papers and so on to shout out the good things that people are doing, just the little things. You don't have to be doing anything major, just the neighbour who brought you shopping because you weren't very well, or the friend who made you a cake. You know, those little things can make such a big difference. Random acts of kindness. I think that's what we need, lots more random acts of kindness.